From the beginning of time, they have always known. From the spirits of the elders, the truth comes home together. Ancient, knowing, living voice. The sage message.
Okay, so this is part 2 of the plight of the wounded and the healer. If you have not, you should probably go and listen to part 1 first. But for everybody else, welcome back. Let's get going. Okay, so we had successfully characterized the 3 different types of the wounded, right? We'd spoken of the non-believer, the spiritual prostitute or the hoe, and the seeker. I'm going to begin by speaking a little bit more about the non-believer and the spiritual prostitute, as it were, because they're both a problem that nobody really has an immediate solution for. My anticipation is that the prostitute eventually becomes a denialist. Eventually, based on the hopping from one skodlo to the next, eventually you will conclude ukuthi akusebenzi. So perhaps the end state of a prostitute that never repents, or a prostitute that never quits the streets, is that they will say, akusebenzi. It must be a lie of sorts. And then the non-believer could, on a good day, the non-believer may turn religious, and in that way they may find solace in prophets. Because in religious circles, you have some gifted people that exist in those spaces who are then labeled as prophets. And those people are a watered down version, and usually uzobeza bethi umoya ongcwele uthi ngikutshela ukuthi. Which in their defense is not a lie. It is a divine spirit that possesses them. It's simply the origins that are debated, right? Because in religious circles, you all know where they'll say the origins of the divine spirit are, right? But in indigenous spirituality spaces, the conclusions may be different. What I will say is, while the non-believer and spiritual prostitute are a problem, they are also quite vulnerable, because these 2 dysfunctional wounded types are also prone to falling victim to spiritual charlatans that are masquerading as healers. So I wanted to just add that last bit because I didn't put it in part 1. The seeker, the more intentional person who has an understanding of themselves, or who thrives to gain an understanding of themselves before they look outward, is probably the best positioned to, in a way, get what they need the fastest. Because they will only approach a healer that has come highly recommended by their ancestors. Otherwise, they're not going anywhere. They'd rather spend time working on some research, looking up information that's going to help enable their process, that's going to help enable their growth and progression towards their self-actualization. The people that I work with are often encouraged to do this. A big part of why I am doing what I am doing is because my understanding is that they are seekers who will proactively find information. They will go out and find information. I have not taken any steps to advertise my podcast. I have not taken any steps to let anyone know about what I'm doing. Literally I've only told one friend about the pod. And I have concluded that the people that the message is meant for will find the message. And this is in the spirit of understanding that what I am doing now is spiritual work. Ngoba ulwazi is a legitimate healing modality. And healers come with different modalities. For me, knowledge dissemination, teaching is one healing modality that I apply. So remember that, okay? And we'll get to healing modalities in a little bit. But just to say, you have your seekers who are our most advanced wounded type. And then you have your more vulnerable types, the spiritual hoe and your non-believer. And each of them deserves a certain type of experience when they approach a healer. And when they do approach a healer, then you kind of, as soon as someone walks in, you can kind of tell in some instances, right? And with me, I genuinely just don't bother myself with spiritual hoes, guys. Ngoba, I have nothing to prove. So I tend not to engage spiritual hoes, as it were. But yeah. Now, let's talk about healers specifically. I don't care to dwell so much on the notion of how someone becomes a healer because I believe there's lots of information on that. I've seen several instances where people are discussing signs that you have a calling, blah, blah, blah. So the market is flooded with this, so I'm not going to go into that, right? But what I will say is healers are referred to as the gifted. And we're going to speak about this later on. And as with modern medicine, there are several disciplines in spiritual healing as well. You have people that could be characterized as alchemists. These are amagedla, nenyanga, right? People that have in-depth knowledge on imithi nokusebenzisana kwayo. It's not enough for you to know about how one herb does one specific thing. Amagedla nenyanga are able to basically concoct, you name it, they can do it. And as the years progress, their healing technology progresses as well. They can actually do amazing, amazing things as long as they have a clear diagnosis from the person that approaches them. And then you also have people that work with divination, right? Izangoma, spiritual mediums, izanusi, imboni. All of these people have the ability to see into the future or the past. Because sometimes your healing may actually be rooted in something that went wrong somewhere in the past. Your healing may have something to do with something in the history of the bloodline. And so you would need someone with the unique capability to go back in time. And this is the basic function of that group of diviners, right? And you have midwives, you have traditional midwives. You have people that work with children, traditional pediatricians. Abantu abasebenza ngamanono usually have the capability to treat children as well. And then you have psychologists. akhona ama-specialist awengulo zengqondo specifically. People that know how to deal with the human psyche. This is also an inherent gift. I'll say no healer has the capability to do everything. And because no healer has the capability to do everything, we kind of need to think about the different healing modalities that are out there. And I often like to categorize the different modalities using the elements, right? The natural elements: earth, air, fire, and water. But it's important for me to say healers will apply or access the elements in order to practice their specific modalities, but the natural elements are governed by izithunywa zikamenzi. Do you remember those from like a few episodes ago? Yes. So izithunywa zikamenzi are the ones that govern the natural elements. And izithunywa can give a special connection to a specific element, to a specific bloodline. Do you see now? So that's why you find families that have generations of healers or light workers that practice using specific modalities and elements, right? Because this is passed down to the bloodline by izithunywa zikamenzi. And then the bloodline becomes the custodian of this specific gift, which is then passed down from generation to generation. And then sometimes you'll find that a bloodline would have water as their primary element. But through intermarriage, they're able to then form partnerships with other bloodlines to then combine capabilities. So as generations go forward, you find that you may start to find a specific bloodline that has multiple capabilities across the 4 elements. I hope that makes sense. Once you have a good understanding, then we can start to unpack each element. And by way of unpacking the elements, we can look into the specific modalities that I associate with each element. And I think it's so important for you guys to remember that this is my interpretation, angithi. So kungenzeka ukuthi you encounter a different framework in the world. Great, I'm happy for you. But in this house, this is what we do, okay? This is what we do. And this is where consulting your ancestors becomes important, because I cannot begin to stress the relevance of you going to consult with somebody that works using the healing modalities and the elements that are attuned to your bloodline. Because in the exact same way that you have healers who are gifted generation after generation with specific gifts, you have bloodlines who generation after generation were supported by those healers. And the reason why a specific bloodline will be supported by a specific healer is because we are inherently ruled by the elements ourselves as people. So you need to keep this in mind. the reason why you ask your ancestors is because you'd like them to point you in the right direction. If you come from an air supported bloodline and you come to someone who is a fire healer or an earth healer, yes, things might work out, or maybe not. I don't know. But I know that compatibility matters a fair bit in this case, because your ancestors need to find a healer whose ancestors they get along with so they can collaborate towards bringing you a solution. Because when you approach a healer, you are aiming for some assistance with your spiritual wound. But if you come to me and I am not trained or I do not have the right tools to support you, then that's a problem, isn't it? So just think about that. Having said that, now let's talk specifically about the different modalities, right? We'll begin with air. And it's really easy for me to then link it to the idea of an aura. The energy field around you as a person, the energy field around any living thing. I think of kinetic energy. The energy an object possesses when it is in motion. Specifically here, then you think about stuff like sound healing. Because sound healing is basically a disruption of the flow of energy as it courses through your body. And a sound healer will use different sounds to achieve a specific result within you. And then and I also think of air modalities specifically as third eye modalities, because they tend not to be seen with the naked eye, right? You can feel it, but you can't see it. It's a bit like the wind. You can feel it, but you cannot see it, right? But you know it's there because you can feel the effect. You can feel it push you on a windy day. So this is how I think about the air modalities, as it were. And then you have earth modalities. And with the earth, I often think of how a tree is rooted in the ground. And this is how it stays firm. I think of grounding. I think of plant medicine. I think of anything that is created in the earth. I think of crystals. I think of bone. I think of tarot cards, which are essentially paper. I think of tea leaves. And then I also consider how all life forms return to the earth in one form or the other through decomposition, right? And so I think of the earth modalities of all that is tangible within a healer's work. And then fire. Now, everybody knows that smoke is the master purifier. And burning a wound is as good as disinfecting the wound with alcohol. Because when you burn something, you resurface it. You strip away the top layer and you bring to light healthier flesh, healthier conditions that lie beneath the surface. A bit raw, a bit painful because it's not a gentle way of achieving anything by any means, but it is effective in that sense. And then I also think about how ash acts not only as a cleanser, but also as fertilizer on the hard ground. And so for the fire modalities, I often think of ukugquma, ukufutha. This is what I think of, because at that point, you heat up these rocks, and in true sauna style, you steam the body. And the idea is you can combine this with herbs and different elements to then cleanse your body through raising of the temperature. This is an example of like a fire-based modality. Then I've seen healers that will do stuff like candle reading. I know of candle magic specifically. And then I also know of people that do wax reading. So after the candle is done burning, then they'll read the wax that is left over. And so for me, this is what the fire modalities possess. And different people know how to apply these modalities in specific ways. And then the last element, water, for me is what I often find to be the most celebrated, life-giving modality. And I think it's easy for people to think of water as the most powerful modality, because as people, the human body comprises of at least, 70% water? Or is it 75? I don't remember. But that is crazy. With everything else that we have in us, for us to know that we are primarily a water body on legs, right? And with water, it's also about how any living thing only survives because it is rooted in earth, but will not grow unless it is surrounded by water. The roots of a plant need to have water for the plant to continue to live. Babies grow completely surrounded in darkness in a belly full of water. And so for me, it is that idea that mammal offspring are grounded by the umbilical cord, yet surrounded by water until maturity. If anything happens to the amniotic sac, the offspring does not survive. And so it's in that sense that water is a celebrated modality. And so you'll find that you have healers that know how to pray over water and administer it as a cure for a broad range of ailments. You have healers that have the specific capability to cleanse the aura of idlos lakho using water bodies of different kinds. And then the beauty of water is it can also provide you with the opportunity where it is combined with the other elements. I spoke earlier of ukugquma. You need water to produce the steam for that sauna effect, right? Maufuta. And then there's when you go to a waterfall and you stand under the force of the falling water. Because the water is falling off a rock edge, it means it's already a mixed bag, because you have the earth energy from the rocks that it's falling against, and then you have the water itself giving you that water bit, and then you have the oxygen that we know is in the water, infusing the air aspect. So the elements in themselves tend to co-create in the same way that they exist to support us in our everyday lives. But the most beautiful thing is how, if you are a seeker type of wounded person, are likely to gravitate towards a healer that applies the modalities that are strongly linked to your bloodline. And I think for me, that is the most beautiful thing. When the universe conspires to bring you closer to what you need the most by way of simply leading you. Now, I've already said, guys, that no healer can do everything. And because of that, it's really important for us to maintain our own discernment when approaching healers. Because healers are only but people, right? The only difference is a healer has the added capability of accessing and contacting the ether. And so when you approach a healer, you need to make sure that you have set yourself up for success as far as possible by preparing and bringing the relevant information. What do I mean? The common myth is you know a healer is genuine when you don't need to tell them anything. This is a myth. If you're going to get the best out of a consultation, you're going to need to narrow the scope of the troubleshooting activities, right? If you only have an hour with a healer, they don't have time for you to come in and wait for them to muddle through the possibilities when it comes to what may be going wrong. If you truly want the best experience, then you'll have at least one prompt. Remember what I said. You don't just wake up, uthi namhlanje ngiyohlola. No. You do preparation work at home. You set the intention with your guides. And when you have set the intention with your guides and you have been shown where to go, then you go. And ma ufika there, you then say, ngithunyiwe lana. I'm here to follow up on this specific issue. I'm here to follow up on my lack of dreams. This is a concrete, one sentence, does not say anything much, but you have given the person that you're dealing with something to go with. Or, ngithunyiwe because I've had an inexplicable headache for the last 6 months. This gives the healer something very specific to look into. And the thing about coming in with a clearly defined scope for your reading also means you afford the person that you have approached the opportunity to say to you, I actually don't really deal with cases like that. I actually don't really know how to do stuff like that. So when you've made the appointment and you're going in, you pray at home and you ask your ancestors to go ahead of you and show up so you can work on the problem together with this person that they have shown you. I always tell people to do this the night before, just in case there are some last minute changes, right? So then you go. And when you get there, then you ask a very specific question. If something else comes up, then great. But at least you set the agenda for the person that is meant to help you. And I cannot begin to stress how much, once you have been shown the right person to help you, you will need to be patient. Right? I am not saying that every time that you have gone through the right steps, when you get to this person, they will immediately come up with the right solution. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes you may need to give it a bit of time, or there may need to be a few more steps. You may go there, uthi wena, I do not dream. And when they look at what the issue is, they may tell you, actually, I need to cleanse you before we begin to work on the problem that you actually want to solve. And you as a person need to be okay with that. But if you have done your spiritual due diligence by engaging your guides, you will not feel a type of way when this person lays out the course to your wellness, basically. Stay with the course. Because spiritual healing is sometimes a complicated process. Sometimes it's actually a little harder than we would like it to be. And in those cases, you need to be patient. And it's also really important for you to remember that you lead the process. The dynamic between the wounded and the healer should always be that the wounded is the one that retains the control in the relationship. And I'll tell you why. It's important for the wounded to retain the control, primarily because your ancestors are the ones that decide if something is being done right or not. And your ancestors are in a position to give feedback to the healer through you. So you should feel perfectly comfortable to say to a healer, I know you said you want us to do X, but I had a dream 2 days ago where my grandfather said, I actually need to do Y instead. And a well-trained healer will go ahead with whatever it is that your dreams are saying. They will help you understand what your dreams mean, and they will follow through on the instructions that are coming through your dreams, right? In a case where you come to a healer and you say, I am not dreaming, before the healer does much else, they need to take steps to find a way to unlock your dreams. Because your dreams are the key to almost everything. Because your dreams are the frequency in which all communication flows. So think about that. When you go to a healer and you're going through the healing process, ask yourself, do I feel led or heard? And you should always feel heard more than you feel led. That's all I'm going to say. And I feel like this is a good place to stop today. We have done the most. I am so glad you've managed to get through both part 1 and 2 with me. We'll be talking in a week. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you all so much. You are all loved, loved, loved by me.
Ancient voices, living voices. The sage message.